right, everybody. Just figuring out the technical issues here. Welcome. I'm Matt Lewis with the Greater MSP Partnership, and I will be guiding you through today's webinar. So be patient with me while I pull some things up here in a minute. If you're here to learn about Minnesota MedTech 3.0, our region's successful Tech Hubs award-winning proposal, and we're going to explain what that is. What the Tech Hubs competition is, and all sorts of other good stuff. And then we're going to take some questions today. Let me start by pulling up some materials that we're going to use to walk through. Just so you can anticipate, we're recording this. This is going to be up on the web at greatermsp.org/medtech. And we're going to do about 20 minutes of kind of overview. I'm going to bring up a partner, Amy Kircher from the University of Minnesota. We're going to have a brief chat. And we're going to save the back half of this hour to answer as many questions as folks have today. Some of them will be able to answer. Some of them will surface questions that we have to track down because this is a really complex effort with many partners, and I won't have all the answers for you today. Just by way of kind of introduction. So Greater MSP, for those of you that aren't familiar, is a public-private partnership. It's a regional economic development partnership for the greater Minneapolis-St. Paul region. And my role there, I work on strategy. So some of my expertise for today is related to our region's competitiveness, our economic strategy, how we build partnerships in this region. But my disclaimer is I'm not a medical technology expert. So as we get into some of the conversation, I'll be able to answer some questions, but we'll be able to surface probably a lot of other questions from people that are interested that we can bring back to our coalition, which includes many impressive experts from the field of medical technology who have spent their careers really at the forefront of this area. So with that, I'll pull up my screen and we will get started. Sir. Don't know. I might need a signal from my team if you're seeing my presenter mode or the normal screen.
It is presenter mode right now.
1 sec. The joys of technology. Okay, that should be good. Can you confirm, Rachel?
Yep.
All right. Sorry for the delay there, folks. So I'm just going to walk you through what this effort is. I'll try my best not to be too long-winded, but I want to cover as much ground as I can in a short amount of time. So I'll start with what Minnesota MedTech 3.0 is. So if we pull all the way up, the idea is that we have a bold new strategy as a region and state to grow Minnesota's global market share in the medical technology industry, global market share of products and firms. And we want to do that by building on our really incredible ecosystem that exists today across Minnesota to one that's even more connected, even more strategic, meaning moving in kind of the same direction, and a focus on kind of smarter medtech. And so we want to accelerate the pace of smart medtech innovation from right here in Minnesota. We'll talk more about that as we go. It's a strategy to achieve inclusive economic growth. So by doing this, by growing Minnesota's global leadership in this industry, we think we can continue to grow good jobs here in our region and state, as well as investment. We think we can move beyond really incredible partnerships that we have today that are a legacy of many generations of innovation in the medical technology space, to a place where there's even a deeper collaboration. You could think of it as kind of multilateral collaboration towards a specific set of outcomes in specific areas, specific technology areas with growing markets, maybe tackling specific disease areas as a region and state. And if we do that, we won't only lead the world on behalf of our country in terms of the competitiveness of this technology. We won't only increase the economic output, but the purpose of this entire industry is improving health outcomes for the world. We want to do that by lowering cost, which is one of the great challenges in this space. So that's what Minnesota MedTech 3.0 is. It's a big idea of a big strategy, not like a new program that's incremental or new organization, but one that brings the assets of our region state together in a shared direction. And as we embark on this strategy, which is fairly new, we kind of enter with some shared principles that I thought were worth naming. So the intention is we're trying to achieve scale, real kind of global scale. So the idea is to move from the market share we have today to an even bigger one. So that requires scale and then a market orientation. We enter with a principle of kind of leadership from industry, and we'll talk about why that's so important from the tech hub's perspective. But we need leadership from all sectors: government, higher education, workforce and labor organizations, economic development, as well as many others. It's about alignment of action, so integrating all the great capabilities and assets we already have as a region. It's about doing work with an equity lens to ensure that this industry, which is so important to Minnesota's economy, is one that everyone can fully participate in, that has pathways to participation, and that results in economic and health outcomes that advance inclusive economic growth, whether that's for workers or entrepreneurs or patients. It's about, again, through alignment, it's exponential collaboration. So it's building on partnerships that already exist to be able to take them to the next level. And it's about the depth of commitment. So it's not necessarily about just kind of endorsing a big kind of vague idea. It's actually about organizations whose leaders are going to commit to being part of a structured partnership where they work together towards those similar outcomes. So what does that all mean? So the strategy of Minnesota MedTech 3.0, it's come together kind of fairly quickly, but builds off of certainly decades worth of learning here in our region. So early this year, at the Greater MSP Partnerships kind of annual event in February, Medtronic CEO Jeff Martha stood up on stage at the Guthrie Theater and talked about kind of an idea, a vision that he had that he'd been talking with other organizations across Minnesota about building a strategy for kind of what's next, what's the next frontier of medical technology across the world, and what's Minnesota's place going to be to continue to lead in that area as it has led for so long. That led to a joint task force with exploration on this topic from the University of Minnesota and leaders from other kind of parts of the healthcare continuum, providers, payers, and others. And then that group started kind of talking to entrepreneurs and investors and other companies and industry associations. We have this incredible industry association, as folks in this space know, called the Medical Alley Association, many others. And what happened is we're kind of a couple months into the work, and it became clear to everyone that the federal government had put forward this effort that our region could go after that might actually align really nicely to the idea of this strategy. So this is a little bit where I kind of came into the story. So the Greater MSP Partnership, which, as I said up front, it's a accredited regional economic development organization for the 15 county Greater Minneapolis-St. Paul metro area. So the metropolitan statistical areas, the federal government defines it. And we kind of stepped up really quickly this summer to take this strategy and connect it to this kind of unprecedented federal opportunity that we're going to share more about today. And so over the summer, we built a coalition of more than 20 different organizations. Many of them had already been involved, but others kind of got on board. You can see them listed at greatermsp.org /medtech. I won't list them all today, but just to give you a flavor for kind of the different types of organizations, there are some there. And so Greater MSP, which is focused on all industry sectors of the region's economy, kind of use this opportunity to say, we might be able to, as a region, build the type of coalition that could go after an incredible federal opportunity to accelerate this vision. So that opportunity is called Tech Hubs. So it's a federal initiative that was authorized as part of the 2022 CHIPS and Science Act by Congress. And it was designed to strengthen the United States' economic and national security by focusing on investments in regions across the country that have the capability to lead the world in certain technology areas. Certainly, we would boast here in Minnesota that we have led the world and do lead the world in medical technology. But specifically, the direction that the industry is going with the developments in artificial intelligence and machine learning and data science would suggest that a new frontier is open to perhaps being won by anyone in the world. And we would like to win that for America here in Minnesota. Doing that will require collaboration across a lot of different stakeholders, whether our area was medical technology or any other technology. And the federal government is saying as part of this competition, they're looking for regions across the country who could lead the world by bringing together industry leaders, higher education institutions, government, economic development groups, workforce and labor organizations, and many other types of partners that are capable of kind of aligning an entire region around a long-term vision for commercializing technology. And so this summer, nearly 200 regions across the country put forward plans on how they could lead the world in the next decade in different technology areas. That really runs the gamut. And if you go to our website, we link to the US EDA's kind of page where you'd be able to see all the different types of tech hubs around the country. But only 31 of those 200 were designated here just a couple weeks ago as being kind of endorsed by the White House and the federal government as being among America's best ideas for innovation clusters for the next decade and beyond. So we were really proud to win that designation on behalf of our region and state. And what that means for us is not only do we get to carry that banner, which we'll talk about, but we also become eligible right away to start competing for federal resources and accessing federal programs that will only be open to these 31 hubs across the country. And this whole effort is being stood up in a part of our federal government called the U.S. Economic Development Administration, which is housed within the U.S. Department of Commerce. So this whole initiative is brand new. All the federal team members working on it are brand new. It's a really unprecedented effort, and we'll talk more about what makes that so. So how does it work? So the federal government said to regions like ours, maybe they had their own strategy for the future of a different technology area. They said there are certain actors that you need to bring together. So I mentioned those before, so I won't repeat them. But certain sectors you need to bring together. Once you do that, you need to create some form of regional innovation office that can not only have those folks at the table, but start to integrate them into some sort of comprehensive strategy. And the federal government said, we want all those sectors at the table, but we're going to score proposals and designate regions specifically based on the strength of industry leadership. So that was specifically scored, unlike some of the other sectors. And then they wanted each region to pick kind of a technology area. It was very kind of specific and describe how America investing in that technology area would be critical to advancing economic and national security. And then they wanted to know how those regions might potentially in the future access federal funding for different types of actions that would be part of a comprehensive strategy related to developing technology in that area, developing kind of the entrepreneurial infrastructure and support for kind of new ventures to start and scale, to grow the talent base for the key kind of occupations and skills that would be needed if industry were to grow, and then to build the right types of key infrastructure that enables those other activities to happen. So because we've been designated, we're now one of 31 regions across the country that's going to compete over the next not quite 4 months to develop a plan for how we would go to the federal government and say, with federal resources, we could kind of catalyze or speed up the implementation of this strategy we've developed. And so a lot of work is going to go into an application over the next few months. And between 5 and 10 of those 31 regions that have won will be awarded resources next spring to get started. there's the possibility that future funding rounds will provide other regions opportunity even beyond that first wave. So why did we win tech hubs in this region? There was a scoring rubric, as I mentioned. And so we think that there's several reasons we won because we wrote an application to that rubric. So several strengths on display is one I've mentioned several times, and as many folks probably on this webinar know, our existing capability in this technology area is in many ways unrivaled. And we have a potential for continued growth in Minnesota. So we're building strength on strength here. We have strong industry leadership, not just in the region, but that really championed this proposal from across all sectors. I mentioned the CEO of Medtronic, but the CEOs of many other healthcare medical organizations kind of raised their hand on this from the beginning. And then other leaders, the governor, leaders of the University of Minnesota, Minnesota State System, leaders of venture capital firms, leaders of organizations that are specifically focused on kind of community development finance, or we had the Shakopee Mdewakanton Sioux kind of tribal government that is focused on how we're going to engage tribal nations across the state, many types of organizations. We had an approach to commercializing technology that walked through the entire process from kind of idea to scale, and they liked the actions there. We developed a strategy that integrates kind of workforce throughout, that integrates an equity lens on all of our actions and outcomes, and that incorporated a lot of other kind of complementary issues that are really important to scaling technology. And then we demonstrated that we have the muscles here in Minnesota to collaborate across boundaries. What we will have to prove going forward to win the next phase of federal funding in this competition is to show our ability to not just dream a great strategy, but to execute that strategy with strong leadership, to really show in specifics how we're going to impact national and economic security, and to align investments and policy to really go after that federal investment. And then we're going to need to enumerate those comprehensive plans for equity and diversity, for creating access to capital, for growing our workforce, and all the other things I described. So you can see on the screen just a little bit of how we're thinking about maybe organizing those different types of work. What does the win mean for Minnesota? So in the short term, some of the questions we've already received, people who might be on today, is like, is there a new program that I could access as an entrepreneur? And I wish I could tell you yes. But in the short term, overall, there's certainly immediate kind of validation that this strategy is, as I said, kind of one of America's best ideas, which gives us confidence that we're kind of on the right track to what we want to do here in Minnesota. And it's a catalyst to kind of move faster. It's going to increase our ability to market Minnesota as a destination for investment and innovation around the world. So later today, as we're recording this, the governor is leading a delegation to Australia, and many organizations, including coalition members, will be sharing this message as part of what we share with firms and government leaders in Australia over the next week. Others are getting on a plane and heading to one of the largest medical and health trade shows in the world, perhaps the largest, in Germany, and the same message is being carried. So we can start doing that right away. We also have access to new federal programs and opportunities that, again, only our region and the other 30 winners will have access to. And then we have this opportunity to apply to bring more federal dollars here into our region and state. In the long term, what this means is all the things I talked about at the beginning. So by working together collaboratively, we're going to gain more visibility into opportunities to innovate because we have leaders that are going to be sharing intelligence that reveals opportunities in specific areas. We're going to have more connected infrastructure to help medtech firms kind of move, again, from idea all the way to scale. We're going to have a more integrated approach long-term to how we build our talent base by developing, attracting, and retaining talent, by having a strategy about supply chain resilience that's critical to our economic and national security. And we're going to have an opportunity really to collaborate in ways that we've never done, because it's really hard to partner across organizations unless you have the resources and infrastructure to kind of enable that collaboration to continue. And the federal government's interested in investing in that. So as I wind down here, kind of what's happening next. So in the next 30 days, we're trying to communicate what this is to Minnesotans like you, whether you're with us today or watching a recording. As I said, we're marketing Minnesota's leadership around the world and our aspiration because we're interested in who else is interested in this concept. We're working to kind of understand this new federal initiative. And then we're beginning our phase 2 application. After that, our region would be standing up a new innovation office that connects all of the great assets we already have here in Minnesota. We'll be aligning organizations' commitments to that office, continuing to work with the EDA on the specifics. And then as of February, we'll be seeking federal funds to catalyze a small handful of projects. And I'll end before I call up a partner. So if you're interested in this, there's going to be all sorts of questions because, again, I'm just scratching the surface so that we have time to open those up. But if you're wondering how you can follow along, if you're with us today live, we already, I believe, have captured your contact information. So you will be on emails where we provide updates along the way over the coming months. If you're watching this recording, perhaps you found it at greatermsp.org/medtech. And in the coming days, there'll be an email sign-up list, so you can sign up for that newsletter. There's going to be opportunities to share ideas, share connections that are going to be important to our coalition at different types of info sessions. Info session for local government partners, info for entrepreneurs, info for kind of other important stakeholders in this effort. And we hope that you'll help spread the word about this. So we're going to try to make it easier for you to be able to share via your own channels, your communications channels with the world. Additionally, you might have some specific questions that many of the organizations that are part of the coalition could answer. I'm just going to give you a couple examples. So one is Greater MSP is providing the lead role on behalf of this coalition. So there are email addresses on the website for people you can contact. But there are also many other partners. So the Medical Alley Association is one I mentioned that has many hundreds, perhaps thousands of members, entrepreneurs and innovators. And they run this incredible initiative called Medical Alley Starts that already connects innovators from around the world to this hub that is Medical Alley. They have a lot of answers. So if you're a member or potential member, you could reach out. If you're interested in kind of the talent and workforce, the Governor's Workforce Development Board is going to be leading that work, and they're going to want to hear from employers about the skill needs and the occupational needs. There are many other examples like that where there's going to be opportunities to reach out to an organization that maybe you're already connected to that's part of this work. So with that, I'm going to promise to kind of stick to my only 20 minutes or so overview. I'm going to pull down my screen and I'm going to ask my team members to help me invite up close partner and leader in this work, Amy Kircher with the University of Minnesota. Hey, Amy, can you hear me?
I can hear you. Can you hear me?
Oh, I can now. Perfect. Thanks for being with us today. Can you start by just sharing with folks who you are and what you do at the University of Minnesota?
Sure. Hello, everyone. Amy Kircher. I'm one of the Associate Vice Presidents for Research at the University of Minnesota. I sit within our Office of the Vice President for Research, which is a system office that looks at the research portfolio across all of our campuses.
Well, you have a kind of particular background in this area where you're certainly more dangerous than I am when it comes to knowledge on medical technology, but we won't put all the toughest questions on you. But would you just start by describing, like, what has your leadership role been in this project, just so people have context? There are many leaders across the University of Minnesota that have been deeply engaged in this work, and you have been working with all of them. But specifically, what have you been doing these past few months?
Sure. As many of you know, the University of Minnesota is huge, mammoth, gigantuan, and we have a lot of interest and excitement about proposals like this that are in a specific discipline that crosses many colleges at the University of Minnesota. So we have champions throughout the university, both as researchers. We have those in our tech commercialization that are translators of information, and certainly we have workforce development. So lots of University of Minnesota folks have been involved in this. I happen to run a team supports our office called SPARK, Strategic Partnerships and Research Collaborative. And we're like a SWAT team at the university where we pull together researchers, leaders, and offer support for big grants, opportunities, and initial implementation. And this happens to be one of those opportunities where we have a great relationship with Greater MSP and regional partners, and we're able to help both look at the opportunity, assess what it is, and how the university can contribute in a way that benefits the proposal.
Well, I have to say, working with the Spark team at the University of Minnesota has been one of the joys of my year, because we have so many incredible leaders across the kind of med tech space and the healthcare ecosystem here in Minnesota, that there is no shortage of brilliance. And then when you get down to the final weeks of having to write what I've called a 5-page term paper, is what all the room the federal government gave us to cram all of our decades worth of learning here into a proposal. Your colleagues, I'll call out Katie Pelican and Cami Connell and yourself, did this incredible work to help us get all of that thought into 5 kind of condensed pages. So I could tell you practiced before this particular proposal. Yeah. Well, could you just share more about how the University of Minnesota kind of sees itself in this effort, or how it's engaged with others?
Certainly. So I think probably most of you have seen the federal government has done some pivoting in how it's awarding large projects and programs. And there's this regional component to them where they want to grow, off the coast. And if you want to win 50 million or more, these regional opportunities are showing up in new and I would say novel ways that we haven't seen before. So for the university, we get involved in several places. Certainly, we are a place where workforce development happens, right? We have talent pipelines where we want our students to go out and get great jobs. So this particular proposal is important to us because we have a lot of med tech training, experiential opportunities for our students, and we see this as just being another way for them to engage, learn, and grow into the discipline of med technology, whether they're on the clinical side or the engineering side or somewhere in between. Secondly, for us, it's the whole ecosystem is important. So you'll find the University of Minnesota at the basic science ends where we're doing, foundational research, but in the med tech space, we all want that to continue to spiral, develop, and then translate to improve patient outcomes. So for us, this is an opportunity to continue to be part of and grow and expand that ecosystem. So the science and innovation that we develop at the University of Minnesota has a place to go, and we have partners already connected.
That's terrific. You touched on this idea of kind of this regional approach, and even beyond this tech hubs competition, we're at kind of a unique, I guess, juncture in American history, I think, of kind of a posture towards industrial policy and regional approaches that is really new. And there's several other efforts kind of going on in the region, including one that the University of Minnesota and you have been kind of deeply working on the more on the research side. But any observations on just this need to work together regionally?
I think it's really an exciting time. We're going to have to spend, especially at the university where we're used to NSF, NIH, single PI grants. It's a little bit of a flip and say, how do we think about a continuum or an ecosystem that requires all the partners? That could be for workforce development or translation or even engagement with our communities. And what's exciting I've seen in our region, because now I feel like over the last 4 years, this might be the 5th or 6th one that we've sort of are coalescing around, where there's a common core regionally where partners are working. And then we add our discipline specific partners depending on the topic. And I think it's exciting because we're working together. It's evident. We just had the NSF director in town. with
The
Senator.
National Science Foundation for the.
Yes, thank you. A National Science Foundation director, which was a big deal for us. That's a get for a university for him to spend a day. And many of you that are on this call, I imagine, were in one of those rooms on October 13th. And as we're driving around the golf cart in between meetings, he said to me, he goes, Amy, lots of people are talking about building a regional ecosystem. It is evident you all have one. And you work on it every day, and you're friends, and you know each other's capabilities. And so for me, that was an incredible testament to sort of the maturation that we have done over the last 5 to 10 years, to say we want to work together and be good partners because we want Minnesota to win opportunities. So I think it's super exciting.
Absolutely. And I think on any one of these opportunities, the idea is we want our region and state to win. And so how do we need to partner in different ways and play different roles in order to get to that win? And that idea allowed people to come together really quickly. We shift from the idea of just collaboration back towards this kind of specific medtech strategy. I did not go more than one level in terms of even the things we put in our 5-page proposal of what this medtech strategy means. What do you think this could mean for Minnesota?
Matt, you and I have talked about it a little bit. I think this is an awesome opportunity in a larger whole. We're known foundationally for medtech here. We're known for healthcare and having good patient outcomes. And we collectively want to move to the next level, whatever that is in the industry. So, we're calling it 3.0. This is I think you've already talked about it likely. This is an economic development grant that allows us to do a lot of things that other grants won't. We're also going to need additional research grants and translation grants and partners with industry and partners with, healthcare systems to test and implement this work. And so what I think this means is it is a catalyzing opportunity for us to grow in a way we couldn't otherwise grow, because it is this type of funding from EDA. We don't see funding like this from the other agencies.
Yeah, it's really at that this area is focused on technology commercialization, and the particular proposal we put forward, it might select specific technology and disease areas, and then we might have the right kind of information sharing exchange to reveal opportunities for innovators, and then the right incubation and acceleration support, and the right capital and the right wraparound support. But that won't be the entire opportunity for healthcare and medical innovation that this can be the continued and growing hub of in the world. But it creates an opportunity for us to have this kind of structured collaboration that enables so many other things to happen, which is what's really kind of exciting. It's like I've called it funding the commons, right? And unless you have that, it's really hard to do what we're setting out to do now. So I guess
I might just one thing about that, like I know you're saying funding the commons, to me, and in this season, like to me, this is the core. Like this is a Christmas tree, and then we're going to be able to go out and get leverage this to get all kinds of other funding to then grow and expand in different ways in medtech, thereby hanging ornaments. But this really is foundational and organization money for us to be able to expand upon.
Well, that's awesome. That was kind of where I was going to end. But any last thoughts on anything you've learned about seeking these types of opportunities that require this deep collaboration? As much as I enjoy working with your team, and hopefully occasionally you enjoy working with me, it's really hard to work across organizational boundaries. And every organization that's working on this coalition already, everybody's got their own timelines and their own demands and their own projects within their setting and their own cultures. And so it's not easy. But anything you've learned?
I think there are a couple of things that I would share. And I think this team has done a really great job so far of having a timeline and knowing where we are. So all partners, we've communicated that well. And I know the next one for phase 2 will come out shortly. But knowing where we are and where our deadlines is, it keeps us all on the same page. I think the second thing I would say to everybody on the call is, there'll be several roles for a lot of people to play. let us know what role you want to play or where you can fit or timing allows, or someone in your organization. Knowing those roles really helps all of us show up in a way that is productive versus, oh yeah, I guess I can show up for a phone call. We don't have much. When you get these opportunities, you get a short window and the clock is ticking, and fortunately, unfortunately, we're going. So we'll go, and we want everyone to come along with. And I think, the communication strategy, so where we are in the process and knowing where to show up, really important.
Well, thank you, Amy. Thanks for joining us, and thanks for all the work that you and your team have put into getting us this far. This is just representative of so many other organizations that have put in a lot of work to get us this far, and will continue to. But we didn't want to keep everybody here for 3 hours today explaining everybody's role. So thank you for representing that, Amy.
Happy to.
All right, so we're going to start turning to questions. So I'm going to take a look in the chat, because I'm sure we've already got a few things there. I've been focused on just trying to get through the presentation, but then continue to bring them. And then I will just call out if there's something that's a question I can't answer today. I'll just talk through that, and our team here is going to be logging everything. Something that you're going to find is on the website that I've referenced a couple times, we'll be keeping kind of an FAQs list. Much as the federal government for the entire Tech Hubs effort is updating its FAQ list almost weekly. As we learn things, we'll try to keep you all updated as well. So I'm going to go to the tab. So the first question is from John. So kudos on the great work the team did to bring this proposal home. How can small and medium-sized businesses get involved beyond the major players that have signed on? So that's a really great question. So I'll give you one tactical example. But I have mentioned kind of how organizations can follow along to say we want to be engaged in some way. So in the proposal, there were organizations, including the Medical Alley Association and the Minnesota Technology Association, to give a couple examples. In our 5-page proposal, one of the things we said was that we have small, medium-sized, and large organizations in this space across our state, and we will leverage those organizations to gather and engage all sorts of different types of companies, both in the problems that we could address in this region. I got a note from someone a couple days ago who's maybe on this webinar now. If I'm raising this next round of capital, it's a really hard time to raise capital. Is there an opportunity here? We want to hear some of those pain points, and we know that leaders in those small, medium-sized businesses might have some of the solutions, right? So as we design our workforce strategy, companies that are doing innovative things, we want to know that so we can apply that into our comprehensive talent strategy. So a short way to answer that question, John, would be we're going to have specific info sessions and specific kind of opportunities to engage, maybe by stakeholder type. And this is one of the priorities we wrote into the application, so you can be sure we have to do it. So I'll stop there and maybe move on to the next question. So this is from Brianne. So how can cities best connect directly with this? How can our ED people best connect our MedTech businesses with this initiative? Brooklyn Park is a member of Medical Alley. Is that the best way to engage? That's one great way to engage. If you're a member of any organization that is part of this coalition, I would encourage you to talk to the leaders of that organization, but it's not the only thing you need to do. So I had mentioned, Brianne, we are going to do info sessions specific to local governments because there are many opportunities there. So that would be one area I can follow up with you on as well. And just to give maybe one more answer to that question, it's not the only way, but a really tactical way to engage is actually the workforce area. I mentioned the Governor's Workforce Development Board will be kind of leading the development of a MedTech strategy. And the reason they're leading is because of that ability to bring together local workforce boards, colleges and universities, labor unions, employers in a comprehensive way. And so that's one area, workforce, that there's going to be pathways to engage, but that's not limited to that as well. You saw the other kind of sections of work. So really great question. I'm going to look in the chat too, because I think some people have been commenting in the chat, but please feel free to keep using the Q&A function. Pick on one from Scott. So you mentioned that workforce is a key element. Will there be a unified job board or something similar that would allow talent to see the breadth of opportunity? Yes, it's a really good question. So I can't predict everything, but one of the things I will share, so in the in the application, one of the things we made reference to is actually an effort that's been working in parallel this year, but maybe a few months in advance. And it's called the Minnesota CHIPS Coalition. And it actually came about as a result of a different part of this same federal legislation I mentioned, the CHIPS and Science Act, where America is looking to double or more its production of semiconductors, right? And the Minnesota CHIPS Coalition came together to say, we have a number of small and medium-sized manufacturers and suppliers of in the semiconductor industry. And as part of seeking federal funding to grow Minnesota's semiconductor industry, this year, the first kind of comprehensive workforce and talent strategy was built for semiconductors. And that was developed by a number of partners, maybe people on this call, local workforce boards, 2- and 4-year higher education institutions, workforce training organizations, labor unions, and the Governor's Workforce Development Board kind of quarterbacked that effort. And so we made reference to doing something like that in MedTech. And the reason I bring that up to Scott's question is as part of that work, I wasn't deeply embedded in it, so I could butcher this a little bit, but as part of that work, it required bringing many employers together to talk about the needs that they see and forecast moving forward. And what came out of that is an understanding that actually for many of the same requirements or needs, different employers had different ways of talking about it. I mean, it wasn't standardized. And so if you couldn't surface the breadth of the opportunity, how could you possibly communicate it to people across all kind of skill levels and various occupations? And so by doing that, there's actually a comprehensive approach now that is not kind of firm to firm, but industry-wide. So Scott, maybe that answers part of your question. We hope to do that in MedTech as well. Another question. So would love to hear more about the physical infrastructure. What are the key corridors for that? So there's a link that's already on the webpage that goes into kind of the federal, like what qualifies and doesn't. They talk about kind of infrastructure that is going to enable the other activities. And so by that, I mean, the more that we could draw a line between like, let's just say, for example, like an incubator, the actual physical infrastructure for the incubator would probably have a direct line. A piece of transportation that allowed somebody to get to the incubator like is technically connected and could be part of our larger strategy, but is probably not something we would be able to seek federal funding for. So we're trying to kind of understand what's maybe like inbounds and competitive and not. But as we think about the bigger opportunity beyond just what we're going to seek federal funding for, which in the scheme of things is not a lot of money, $50 million doesn't transform a regional economy. That's like billions and billions. So we'll have to figure out within this federal money, what infrastructure, if any, will we kind of ask for resources for. So hopefully that answers, or at least begins to answer that question. I'm going to go back to the Q&A, bounce back and forth here. I think we're good there. Is the template report available from the Minnesota CHIPS work? Yeah, I think there's something available that we can follow up on. Maybe if Rachel is in the chat, she might be able to. She like worked on that in great detail, and she might be the person that can follow up on that. That's a great question. Is it possible to share a copy of the 5-page application? Absolutely. It's actually live on the White House website. And so for my team, if nobody on my team has a link up, I can't kind of pull up my screen right now. We will make sure that is linked to on the website because it is, you can actually see all 31 proposals that won from across the country, which is something I've been looking into just to kind of understand some of the other peers we're competing with. Any other questions? It's maybe more of a comment. We need to do something similar for broadband. Okay. Yeah, Scott. We'll give it maybe one more minute. If you're joining us late, just opportunity to take any questions about the Minnesota MedTech 3.0 kind of coalition and strategy, or the broader federal tech hubs initiative that our region state has won because of this strategy. Who do we contact if we think we have something to offer? Great question. So you can contact me. So on the website that we've linked to in the chat a couple times, let's keep adding that in, team. There's some contact information in there. Currently I'm the lead on the coalition, so you can feel free to contact me, and I will probably loop in my colleague Rachel. I think there's a media contact on there as well, but feel free to just contact me directly. Anything? Oh, okay, we got a couple new questions. John, Wisconsin seems to have a medical focus theme as well. What's the difference between our and their proposal? Really good question. I had a flag up front that I didn't want to get too deep into the technical areas because I didn't want to trip myself up. But one thing I will say on this, I haven't read each of the other. There's 10 other designated proposals that have something to do with health outcomes. Personalized medicine, I think, is the Wisconsin proposal, if I'm remembering correctly. Each one of those tech hubs has a slightly different flavor to what it's going to do related to health and medical. There was not another region of the country that focused on kind of our definition of smart medical technology, of our medical manufacturing strength at the kind of nexus of artificial intelligence and data science, and broadening the idea of medical technology to kind of any kind of technology that takes place in the healthcare setting, not only an implantable device. That square definition of medtech, according to the federal government, not just my read, there was no other proposal like that. Whereas there were several other proposals having to do with medicine, kind of biohealth, that were kind of overlapping. One thing we did notice is there were a couple other regions, Phoenix, I think, was one of them, that did apply for something that was kind of squarely in our wheelhouse and did not win. But one of the things we'll be doing is looking into each of those proposals and even potentially speaking to how our region might be able to work with other regions. Because again, this is at least the tech hubs portion of our strategy. This is about America's competitiveness. And so they will want to see certainly that we're thinking about leveraging all the assets in our region and state, but also working with others. So hopefully that begins to answer that, John. And then Edward, will you be posting this recording? Yeah, this recording will go up on the website I've mentioned, greatermsp.org/medtech. It'll probably go up on Monday, so we'll have this available. And if we do any other kind of info sessions like these, we'll make those available as well. Just checking the chat. We'll give it one more minute. Anybody have any final questions? All right. Well, thank you for taking the time to join us. I want to thank my colleagues, Phil and Rachel, for making this all possible and happen behind the scenes. Thank Amy again, and all of the partners that worked so hard to make this happen, and everybody in our region and state that does the work that makes this possible, that we want to build off of and strengthen going forward. So thanks for joining us, and we'll talk soon.